Our next guest, who is very widely followed, co-authored a report at the start of this year called The Top Risks of 2024. And he said that this year was politically the Voldemort of years, the Annus Horribilis, the year that must not be named. Well, we are now 1/3 of the way into said year, so we decided to check in to see if the year has been unfolding as he predicted. Ian Bremmer is the president of Eurasia Group, and I spoke with him earlier. Ian, it's great to have you with us.
Sure. Happy to be back with you, Kim.
Let me ask you, and I apologize for the long question, you highlight as your top risks in the report, and I'll run through them, a broken up Ukraine, the Middle East, ungoverned AI, the axis of rogues, meaning Russia, North Korea, and Iran, a stagnant Chinese economy, fight for critical minerals, inflation, high rates, El Nino, and risky business, meaning culture wars going into boardrooms. Those were all top risks, but number one was the United States versus itself. So tell us what you mean, and maybe tell us a bit of whether it's better or worse than you anticipated.
I'd say so far about the same, but we are not yet at the election. Certainly we believe that the United States is a democracy in crisis today, that the perceived legitimacy of U.S. political institutions weaker in America than in any other advanced industrial democracy, than the whole G7. And there have been, surveys that have come out over the last couple of months that absolutely show that to be the case. The one thing that Americans do agree about politically today is that the other side politically is trying to destroy democracy. Biden supporters believe that about Trump supporters, and Trump supporters believe that about Biden supporters. And that is a really bad time to have a national election, especially with two candidates that are really unpopular. So that's what we're facing right now. And, look, it's not a war like we have in Europe or like we have in the Middle East, but the U.S. is the most powerful country in the world. It's the largest economy in the world. And we rank these risks on the basis of the impact that they'll have on the world as a whole. And so in that regard, it's hard to argue that this belongs anywhere else but number one right now.
I want to bring up the charts. You talked about people not having faith in their own institutions. It's pretty startling to see these numbers. And even more startling, you highlighted as well that the fate of the world, 8 billion people, is going to be decided by 160 million, somewhat disinterested, as you mentioned, even by tens of thousands in the swing states. So let's just kind of cut to it then. If the election was today, what do you think would happen?
I think that if the election were today, Trump would win, probably 60-40 likelihood, but it's 6 months away, and I have very low confidence in making that projection. But I'm not just concerned about what happens in the election. I'm worried about the run-up to the election. I'm worried about the disinformation. I'm worried about the vulnerability of the election, both to internal and external forces that would love for the level of inability of Americans to view their democracy as proper functioning to become more chaotic. I'm worried about the potential of violence around this election, and also the backlash for whoever loses to refuse to accept the outcome, and for their supporters to believe that it's a subversion of democracy. I think that the U.S. today is the only country among the advanced industrial economies that is not capable of having a free and fair election, a transfer of power that is seen as legitimate by its entire population. Canada has its problems, the UK, France, Italy, Japan, but all of those countries can have elections, and the majority of people will say, yeah, that was the way. We don't like the outcome maybe, but it was legitimate. The US can't do that in 2024. And that's a very serious problem.
That is an understatement. Let me ask you about the pending piece. You talked about you're worried about the run-up to the things that will happen internally in terms of the violence, but even externally, you highlight a risk, and probably for those who don't watch geopolitics every single day, don't think as much about, but what can happen to Ukraine, given they think that Trump might get in, or in Israel, given that Trump might get in. What might they do now to try and front run maybe perhaps the results that might be coming in?
Well, look, there are clearly many countries in the world that are considered rogues by the U.S. and its allies, not civilized members of international society. You've cut off diplomatic relations. You're maximally sanctioning them. You're fighting them on the global stage. I'm talking here about Russia, about Iran, about North Korea, and a few other smaller dictatorships. These are countries that want chaos in the United States. They want the U.S. To burn. They want the Americans to be fighting internally because it creates more space for them to act with impunity. So there's no question that if you're China, you're not sure who you want to see win right now. But if you're Russia, North Korea, and Iran, you want Trump. And you want Trump because you think that that is going to cause more chaos. It's going to cause more international instability, and these countries benefit from that instability. I will say that doesn't mean that Trump is going to be a disaster in foreign policy on every front. I don't believe that. For example, I mean, he runs the most powerful country in the world. If he tells the Mexicans, I expect you to allow the U.S. military to work with you to shore up your border, and I expect you to take the southern border of Mexico more seriously, or else I will sanction you till your head turns blue, I think the incoming Mexican government will listen to him. So it's not like Trump's going to fail everywhere in foreign policy. He didn't fail everywhere in foreign policy the first time around, but there'll be much more uncertainty. There'll be much more tail risk, both on the upside and the downside, in a period of great geopolitical uncertainty. So the question for you as a non-American, if Trump becomes president, is do you feel lucky?